Alright, so today what's going to happen is I'm going to be replacing the CPU on my extra PC, my LAN PC. It is coming from an i5-4590, and we are going to replace it with this today, which I picked up on Kijiji for 130 bucks. It's Canadian, so it's a good price. And I picked up this one here, if I can get it out, there we go, with an i5 4690K. See if we can get a close up of that one. 4690K, and additionally, this has been deleted by the previous owner. So we're actually going to replace the thermal compound on the inside and then swap it out with the one inside. So we're going to go through the build process today. I'm going to probably speed up the video through other things and then pretty much just replace it. Should be clean cut, and you'll get to see the inside of my build. Okay, so we're going to start off actually by undoing like the thermal grease that's on the processor right now that has been deleted. We're going to do that using Arctic Silver 5, which has been in a previous video that I did replacing the GPU thermals. And I'm also going to need a couple of alcohol swabs just to clean up the material. This is the computer that I'm actually going to be replacing the processor in. I just figured it's going to be good to have this on board right now. And then I'll just do the CPU first. I'll take everything apart and I'll show you all the steps for it. So when we are doing our CPU, since this has already been deleted by someone else, not by me, I haven't really had too much experience in this, but I believe I can just kind of like twist off this this pad right here, and that should expose the thermal grease under there. So I'll do that and we'll come back. Okay, so this is what it looks like. This is the actual chip there. You can see the dies in the middle and the thermal grease is kind of all around it. So that's kind of interesting. This is just the actual thermal pad that they put on it. It's just a piece of aluminum here. So I'm going to clean off both of these. Okay. So as you can see, you can now clearly see the die right there. And if you've seen my other video, this is very, very similar to like a GPU die that's in the video. It's that same that mirror finish that's on it. I'm not too worried about the thermal grease that's around that. This is the part that's going to be conducting all the heat and where the heat needs to be spread. So I'm just going to be putting the thermal paste on that. And once again, I just cleaned off the heatsink that's attached to it, so no more grease on there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to place a bead of my thermal grease, Arctic Silver 5 again, along the die here, and then I'm going to put my heatsink back on top of it, and then it's going to be ready to be installed. Okay, so that's done. I applied a little bit of pressure on the middle of it right here, just to ensure that the thermal paste has spread out. I'm just going to let the CPU block do the rest of the pressure now. I don't really need to force it down anymore. I'm just going to let the pressure do the rest of it over there. Okay, so now that this is done, I'm just going to put this off to the side. We'll have to apply some more thermal paste on the top of it when we attach the cooler, but that's kind of set aside. We're all prepped up, ready to go. So now we'll start dismantling the case, and then I'll show you the insides and where we're actually going to be working right now. So this is the Fractal Design Node 202. It has an included power supply in the unit, located over here. Really simple to open up, but kind of a pain to build in. So I don't actually have to dismantle everything, but I am going to take off these 4 screws that you see here, and that's going to allow me to get onto the inside of the actual machine itself. Okay, with those 4 screws off, I'm going to flip it over, and then I can remove the shell that has everything in it. So there's the flip over. You can already see the CPU cooler right in there. Nice Noctua color scheme. And then we open it up. And there we go. So there's the inside of my machine. So quick spec rundown. As you can see, what I have here is my GPU. So this is actually my old RX 470 that I had on my desktop that I also replaced the GPU compound, and it's a lot better now that I did that. So that's in here. I have my 4590 Intel processor underneath my Noctua NHLi cooler, I think. It's the Mini ITX one. 450 power supply. I got 16 gigs of DDR3 Vengeance low profile Corsair RAM. What else can I say? I have a 256 SSD, which is more than enough for what I need. I don't need too many things on this. And then a host of other stuff. This is an H87N motherboard, so it does have the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built in. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so let's talk about how on earth I'm actually going to do this. So now I remember that this is actually quite challenging, and to release the CPU cooler, I actually have to get at the back of the motherboard, which means that I actually have to take out this entire chassis, which is totally what I didn't want to do in the first place, but it looks like I'm going to have to do that. Damn. All right. Yeah, I'm going to have to get it from the back. Okay, well, that's annoying, but that's what I got to do. It is an easy sort of a task. Everything is held in by plastic clips. You can kind of see them around the side here. Here's one. There's one. There's a couple over here as well. So they just kind of unclip. You can kind of already see the plastic flexing there. They unclip, and then this metal chassis comes out, and I'll be able to get to the back side of this motherboard, which means that I can replace the cooler. And I forget if there's a motherboard cutout. I really hope there is. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, so that's what I'll do now. Okay, so now the chassis is out, which is perfect. I'm going to try to kind of grab it in a way that I'm not screwing everything over. I'm going to have to flip this over. So let's flip it over and let's see what we're dealing with in the back here. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now we can see that, oh, dust filters are nice there. I'm going to flip this over again. I'll get my lower chassis out of the way. Put the back there. Now, you can see what we're dealing with here. Okay, so there's my motherboard cutout, and you can see the 4 screws that are around my CPU cooler. A couple dust shrouds as well, you can see that. They're all magnetic, which is nice. But we're really interested in just the motherboard cutout. So that's what we're going to focus on for right now. Put this back in place, because that was a pain last time. I forgot about this one. Okay, we'll put that there. Let's get these screws out of the way. So I think what the best case scenario for me right now is to flip it up on this side and then for me to grab it on that, because I don't really like having this the way it is right now. I think this is going to be a better way to kind of focus it like this. So you can see that the motherboard is, or you can see that the CPU cooler is this one right here, and it should be coming off while I do this. So I'm going to be grabbing it from this side, and then I should just be able to get it out like this. And I have no idea what's going to happen, but we'll see. Now, Noctua, I'll take this moment to just talk about Noctua for a second here. They're very easy to install. Their CPU cooler, especially this one. Sometimes CPU coolers can be a little bit of a hassle and a little bit of finicky. The Evo 212 comes to mind. It's a very, very cost-efficient cooler, but sometimes it can be a little picky. Of course, you're going to have, like your mileage is going to vary based upon what kind of motherboard you have and what kind of chassis you have as well. Just because some are going to be easier, some might be a little bit more finicky. But I was actually very impressed with this Noctua cooler because it is actually incredibly easy to install. Even in this very, cramped quarters ITX build. So right now I'm just unscrewing the screws in the back here. No particular order, it doesn't really matter. But as I said in my other video with the GPU cooler, or replacing the GPU thermal, you do always want to make sure you tighten in a diagonal pattern, just so that the pressure is evenly distributed. So I will do that in the end when I reattach this cooler, but for right now, just releasing it doesn't really matter. Okay, I got the 4 screws out. I'm going to put this back on its side here, and then I'm going to take out the CPU cooler. There we go. So back in, everything's okay. Now we're just going to take up this here, and I kind of have to deal with these wires a little bit. And as you can see in an MITX build, wires get in the way, and it's not that they cause a problem, it's just they get in the way. So I'm actually going to take out this one over here. I believe this is just a USB header. Seems like it anyways. It is, there we go, it's out. Let's see what else. I have a CPU thing here, and I have my dual fan splitter, which I can take out as well. It's for my Corsair fans, so I'll take that out. I'll take out the power to this fan as well. And let's see if I can just keep my CPU power in here. I don't really want to take that out anyways. Okay, so let's get this Noctua cooler out. You can already see that it's kind of moving, jiggling a little bit. I'm just going to try to put a little bit of pressure up on it. Yep, there we go. And it just comes out very nice. Good. Okay. So I have, again, thermal grease on the aluminum heatsink that I have for the Noctua here. And just to show you the size of this thing, like very, very small. Okay, very small. Really, really high performance in terms of the thermals that it gives. I'm not going to be overclocking anyways. My motherboard won't support overclocking, but since this is an MITX build, I'm not going to be overclocking anyways. If you did want to overclock in an MITX configuration, you're going to want to make sure you have a decent cooler for this. You're not going to get a ton of overclocking even out of this cooler, but it's just going to make sure that it's a little bit more quiet than it. I really would recommend it on these MITX coolers. You'll need a beefy cooler to overclock just to make sure that your thermals all are in level. So I just released the guard for the CPU. That's this little lever right over here. And now I'm just going to take out the CPU after flipping up this guard here. Perfect. And then we have our CPU that is exposed. And I know this wire is kind of in the way here, but I'm going to take it out and I'll show you it. So we're just going to pick it up here. Perfect. There we go. There is my, well, it's obviously unclean because it had grease on it, but there is my CPU, the 4590. So I'm going to now be replacing this, the one that we just replaced the thermals on, the 4690K. So I'll put this off to the side. And then I have my new one here. I am going to just clean it off before I put any more thermal paste in it. But I am going to seat it in right now, and then we'll talk about what the next step is. I'm just going to inspect to make sure that everything's good on the backside of it. Yeah, everything looks fine, in case you wanted to see what the backside looks like. There you go. Not really anything. I'm just seeing if there's any bent pins or anything like that. Okay, so when I'm going to be replacing this now, I have a couple things that I want to pay attention for. And when I am replacing this, I do want to make sure that I place the corner where the markers are. So there is a little corner marker on these chips, and I do want to make sure that I place it where that corner goes. So I'm just looking for where that corner marker is. And you know what? I kind of forget where that is. So I'm going to flip this down. Ah, there we go. It was on the guard. So on the CPU guard, it has a corner pointing to, it has an arrow pointing to one of the corners, and that's what I want to match my CPU up to. So I have a little hashtag of a corner in this one. You can kind of see it there. And I'm just going to make sure that that's pointing in the direction that the CPU guard tells me it is, because that's going to ensure that everything's properly seated. So I'm going to put that bad boy in there. All right. It's in there. Okay, good. I'm going to clasp this down now. So I'm just going to put the CPU guard back over, and then I'm going to just engage my clip. Now I'm going to see something else here. Yeah, perfect. Okay. You're going to notice something here. Remember how I said that I only put a little bit of pressure on this after I placed the thermals, thermal grease on it, and I'm just going to let the CPU cooler. I actually kind of lied. It's actually going to be the CPU guard that's going to do that. There's two little ridges on the CPU guard that are going to apply pressure on this here to ensure that it is attached firmly to the CPU. So as I buckle this down here, there we go. Okay. A little bit of nerve-wracking there because I had to put quite a bit of pressure on it. But I just wanted to ensure that this is going to be firmly in place, and I can't even move it around, so we're good to go. All right, so let's actually just clean it off a little bit more for right now. So I'm just going to remove any excess grease that's on this. Doesn't look like there's much, but I just wanted to make sure that it is going to be completely clean, so that has good contact. Good. Just getting the excess alcohol off when I do that. Okay. I'm also going to clean off the thermal grease from my aluminum heatsink as well, the Noctua one, just because since I did lift it up, there could be air bubbles that happen. So you never really want to reuse thermal paste, especially if you've removed the cooler and allowed, you know, the separation to occur from the processor and the heatsink. So it's always just kind of a rule of thumb. You cover your bases once you do that. So I always make sure that if I do misplace a cooler and don't seat it properly, or I do something like this, I always do replace the thermal grease no matter what. Even if there could be some, and even if it's in looking like good condition, I always do replace it. Rule of thumb, just do it. Better safe than sorry. Okay, That's nice and clean now, nice and shiny. So I'm going to apply some more thermal paste onto my actual cooler. Again, Arctic Silver 5, good quality brand one. I believe the previous owner used Noctua stuff, which is fine. Which is fine, but I just wanted to use some of my own stuff there. Okay, so I'm just going to apply a little grain of rice, essentially, the same thing that I applied on the GPU die from a couple videos ago, and then we'll put the cooler back on. Okay, so now that's done. I'm going to replace the cooler back on it, and then I'll have to flip over my motherboard again and then install all those screws again. So I'm going to put this in here. It doesn't really matter the orientation that I put this in, but I am going to try to get, I'm going to have to do it like this, I think. Because I know that my CPU fan is over there, so I basically have to, yeah, I'm going to have to route it like that. That's going to be the only way that I can actually do this. So I'm going to pop this on, just apply a little bit of pressure on this one so that when I tip it up here, so that I can actually get the screws in the back, it's going to thread nicely. So I am just going to pop this over on its side, and I'm just choosing which side. I'm going to choose that side over there. So I'm going to lift this up now, keep my pressure on. Beautiful. Okay, so I have my 4 screws on. Now I'm just going to, once again, just kind of brace it a little bit here. And then I am going to tighten them in a diagonal pattern. There's one. So I'm doing the top one here, then I'm working my diagonally downwards, and then I'll go back up to this one, and then diagonally again. And you're only tightening them until essentially you don't really want to torque it too much. These are nice threads, so I haven't experienced one or haven't seen anybody strip anything, but really you don't want to put too much torque on it because the motherboard isn't exactly the most strong of materials. It is a little bendable, flexible. I'm going to go one more round of tightening, just doing a little bit. And it looks all good to me. Okay. All right, well, that's done. Good. Put it back down on its end here. I'm just going to make sure now I attach everything that I unplugged in order to all do this. So for the first thing that I want to put in here is going to be my CPU fan. So I'm just going to try to route that out of the way from everything and plug that in. Good. That's done. I have my USB header that I wanted to plug in now. Actually, I lied. This is the audio connector. Not USB. There's only USB 3.0, and that's handled by the header in the front. So you kind of get a scope of how MITx builds are very cramped, and you know what? Sometimes it is quite hard to install these little things. It gets to be, especially with somebody who has big hands, it is a little hard sometimes. But patience. The problem of not really being able to see what you're doing so much because your fingers are usually in the way from it. But I think that's all good. Yep. All right, I'm gonna put my fan header in now. So those are my 2 Corsair fans, and it has a Y splitter on them. CPU is already in there, so that's good. Don't need to do anything more on that. Good. I'm just gonna try to tuck that away there, just to try to get it out of the way of the fan so it can dissipate and get as much heat, as much airflow in as possible. That's pretty much it. So now what I get to do is I essentially get to put this back into the case now, into the bottom chassis. And then I will put it back into that. Put it back into the normal one there. So I'm going to pop it back in here, and then that's almost going to be done. So I'm going to try to get it in first here. Then it should just kind of sit into place afterwards. Yep. Okay, good to go. So there we go, that's good. Now I get to pop on the other chassis here. So that's the front side, just basically reversing what we've already done. Just making sure all the fans and everything or the fan guards are good. Put this on here. As far as I know, there's no clipping mechanism for this. It's just the 4 screws that we unscrewed before. So flip this over on its side, or on the back, I should say. There we go. Now I'm just going to put in the 4 screws that we took out. All done. There we go. So I'll be booting it up. obviously making sure it works and all that stuff, but I don't believe there should be any problem with it. So there you go, replacing a processor on a Fractal Design Node 202 MITx enclosure. So I hope you guys liked the video and found it a little informative. I always get some questions on how to build computers and sort of the things of like, how'd you get into this? And honestly, it was just one of those things that you pick up, you try. I screwed up my fair share of computers for sure, but it's one of those passions that you just kind of like to do, and I know it's fun. Some people like building on their cars. I like building on my computers, I guess. If you guys like it, I'll definitely make some more because I'm always building computers. I'm always changing out parts. And you'll get to know a little bit more each time. So for that, we'll say goodbye, and I'll talk to you guys later.